States are a specialty game call that are typically used to make sweeping changes to the game's audio in reaction to a global event, such as the player entering a state of shell shock or being above or below water. A unique aspect of states is that they can be used to offset object properties in a way that can be applied gradually over a defined amount of time. In this example, we have a heartbeat sound that's already been imported as a sound SFX object. The loop property of the object has been checked so that it'll play indefinitely. We'll use a state to indicate whether the player is dead or alive. When the player is alive, we want to hear the heartbeat, but when the player dies, we want the heartbeat to stop, but not instantly. We want it to gradually fade out. When the player spawns and is returned to full health, we'll use the state transition to quickly restore the heartbeat. Because states are a type of game call sent from the game engine, we're going to need a corresponding object in Wwise that can receive this call. This object is called a state group. To create a state group, click the Game Syncs tab in the Project Explorer, and then within the States folder, choose the default work unit. Then click the Create New State Group icon, and we'll name this Player Life. This name must perfectly match the name of the call being sent to Wwise from the game engine. Once created, a state group then needs to be configured with all of the possible conditions for that state group. In our case, we only have two possible options, dead or alive. With the player life state group selected, then click the Create New State icon, and we'll name this first state Alive. Then choose Player Life again, click the Create New State, and then we'll name this next one Dead. Note that the names of the states must also perfectly match the names for the calls being used by the game engine. Now we're ready to define the time it takes to transition between the states. Select the Player Life state group. In the Property Editor, you see the Custom Transition Time area. This is where you can define the time it takes to transition from one specific state to another. Click the Insert button. We'll set the From column to say Alive, and the To to say Dead. And if you remember, we want the person to slowly die over the course of 5 seconds. When the player respawns, we want them to come back to life quickly. So we'll insert another row and set the values here appropriately, from dead to alive, and the default 1 second will work perfectly. Now that we have the state group set up with the desired transition times, we're ready to connect the state group to the heartbeat sound. In the Project Explorer's Audio tab, choose the heartbeat sound, and then in the Property Editor, click the States tab. You'll see an Add button. When we click it, you can now choose the Player Life state group. Below the state group, you're going to see all the possible states shown. Each state has properties that can be offset when the corresponding state is in effect. We don't want anything to be offset when the player is alive, but when the player dies, we want the volume of the heartbeat to fade away to nothing. In the dead state, set the voice volume to -96. Finally, we're ready to test how a change in the player life state affects the heartbeat sound. We need to first set which state we want the player's life to be in. In the Transport Control view, click the States button if it's not already selected. To the right, you'll see a list of any state groups that could impact this sound. And then further to the right, you see a pull-down menu where you can set a state group to any state within that state group. In this case, we'll start with Alive. We'll now click the play button, and we hear the heartbeat sound. Now we can simulate our player dying by simply changing the state from alive to dead. Here we hear the sound gradually fade out over the course of 5 seconds, which was dictated by the value we set up in the transition time. Now we'll simulate our player respawning and being restored to full health by changing the state to alive. And we hear the heartbeat sound come back within a second.